Petty cash. The word petty, I guess, comes from the French petite or something of similar extraction. It means small balances of cash. The large cash balances are maintained in the cash book. The cash book feeds the bank account. In most businesses, the amount of cash on the premises is going to be relatively small. Increasingly, I suspect, a lot of retailers, the same is true as well as a great many transactions by credit card or by direct bank transfer. Now, if you've got cash sitting around the office, you've got something that is subject to error and frankly subject to theft. So it's necessary to keep some kind of control over this. The most common way to do it is the impress system. The impress system works very, very well as long as people are fairly determined to make sure that the controls over cash are maintained. It's a very, very simple system. Let's take an example. What you do is you have physically a cash box, maybe a lockable cash box that has an amount of money in there. And let's say you put $1,000 in there to set the thing up. What you'll also have in there is a little book of receipts or a little book of expense vouchers and space to record or to store original receipts from expenditure from third parties. Okay, what we mean here is before any cash is taken out of the cash box, now this cash box, at a practical point, should be guarded by somebody who's very, very diligent and probably a little bit scary because of the fact that they will only give you money from the cash box if you are able to give them a receipt for where it came from. Or if it's something that doesn't generate a receipt, let's say something happens, let's say you lost the receipt, or the kind of scenario that happens to me quite often, you get a taxi and the taxi driver is unable to give you a receipt for the ride. You have to be able to fill in a piece of paper that says, I declare that this is a legitimate business expense, this is what it was, this is who the money went to, i.e. me, and I'm claiming it, and the person who looks after the petty cash decides whether he or she is satisfied by your explanation. If not, you ain't getting no cash. Okay, this person is only going to give you cash in exchange for an expense voucher or some sort of written declaration from you of exactly the same amount. Okay, an expense record is then submitted. The same amount of cash is taken out of the box. The key point here is that if, for example, I have a taxi ride for $25, I will hand the slightly scary person who looks after the cash box and the records of petty cash, I will hand them a taxi receipt for $25. That person then hands me $25 back in cash and grabs my receipt from me with the same hand. So at the same time, we've got, imagine this physically, the left hand, because I've decided this is somebody I used to work with, and I'm thinking of a person in particular, she would give me $25 with her left hand and take the receipt from me in her right hand. Okay? Under no circumstances whatsoever is anybody ever allowed to take any money out of that petty cash tin without completing a petty cash voucher at the same time. Because if you do this, it's going to exploit something that's very, very simple but very, very effective. Let's take a look at how we keep a record of it. For example, here, imagine that you have an opening balance of $1,000, okay, and that came in from the bank account, say. So we sent the scary person to the bank to collect $1,000 out of the bank account. We'd also record that, by the way, in the cash book, the cash payments book, because that's money going out. Okay, somebody went to the supermarket and maybe they bought coffee and biscuits or whatever else for the staff common room. They had a receipt for $21.12 and they filled in voucher, in this situation number 332. And they've explained that here's the receipt, and they go to the frightening person and says $21.12 is what I paid. Frightening person hands over precisely $21.12 with her left hand and takes your receipt for $21.12 with your expense voucher explaining who you were with her right hand. The expense vouchers go into the petty cash tin. Now you'll notice therefore at this point, although the actual cash balance has gone down by $21.12, what has come into the petty cash tin instead is a receipt worth $21.12. So at any point in time, if you were to add up the cash and add up all of the expense vouchers, they will come back to the original preset limit of 1,000. The whole system falls and begins to really get a bit ragged if people are allowed to take money out and say, I'll give you the expense voucher tomorrow, I've just left it downstairs. The scary person will never accept that if they're doing their job properly, because as soon as you allow that sort of system to happen, then at any point in time, the total of the cash tin and the receipts will not equal the preset limit. Okay, we've got a couple more. Let's say, for example, somebody took a taxi Okay, and that's written up in the petty cash tin using similar principles to other books of original entry. You've got a figure for the total, and then you've got columns explaining where that went to. You find generally in most small offices in particular, the number of reasons for the cash movement is actually relatively small. It's often things like staff welfare, travel, stationery, and the, the dangerously wide category of other. Okay, when other starts explaining 90% of the cash movements, that's when you need to break other down into some separate columns. Okay, so we've got a number of these things. Okay, on the 31st, the end of the month, we see that we've got a subtotal here. Okay, 453.76. Now, at the end of the month, it's normal to go to the bank and replenish that. So what this person has done is they've then gone to the bank and taken out precisely 546.24. Now that money is going to go into the petty cash tin. And here's the genius of the impress system. When that 546.24 goes into the petty cash tin, these expense vouchers go out of the petty cash tin and they are handed to the accountant, okay, who then has an expense, knowing that essentially we've had in the period an expense from cash, petty cash, actual notes and coins, 546.24, and that's explainable because of the fact that we spent 64.24 on staff, food and drink, 20 on travel, 430 on stationery, and 32 on that troublesomely wide category other. They can then use that to record records of where the cash disappeared from in the business. It really is a very, very simple and very effective system. For it to work, you just need to make sure at any point in time, nobody's allowed to get their hands into the cash tin without swapping it for an expense voucher. If you have that policed fairly well, this system works, very, very simple system, works very effectively indeed. It comes up in the exam, and it's very, very much used in practice.